So, before we had our guest speaker this week, which is Venerable Tubden Chodron on video. We've been working with a theme of path and really what is it to enter a path that removes suffering? What is this thing we call renunciation? And as we engaged on this, we want to first identify, what is this suffering that we get involved in, and why does it happen? Our book study has been on chapter 3, right, which is why do we suffer? What's the cause of this mess? And so it's the second noble truth. First noble truth is that as long as we are engaged in worldly life, it's going to have some pain, right? There's just no way around that. We're going to get sick. We're going to have ups and downs. Our body's going to grow old. It's going to die. And, sometimes the car won't start. So as we're engaged in life, we start to realize that worldly existence is really rife with unsatisfactory moments, which ultimately make up all the moments. The simple joys that we get in life, they don't last. Right? Really good stuff, and then it goes away. And really terrible times happen; they go away. And sometimes just the absence of suffering, we think of that as joy, which is pretty interesting. So in our life, being human, it's just a conditioned thing, that we're going to get old, we're going to die, we're going to get sick, we'll have some jobs and some things will happen, and everyone I know will come and go, and everything that comes together falls apart, and it's just the nature of things. And that there's going to be this really interesting factor, and it's this idea of stress. There's a lot of stress that happens in our life, even on very subtle levels. Very subtle levels. We have a bit of stress over really hoping this happens, and it can be on real subtle levels around attachment, I'm thinking of cheesecake right now. And, really, I'm looking forward to that piece. I'm hoping you don't get it first. There's a little stress there. Or that it's a big enough piece. Or when I go home, there's something in the fridge still. But on very subtle levels, thinking about what is it at home? Or, what is it if somebody likes me or doesn't like me? And what if I say something that upsets someone? There's this constant state of mind that has us worrying, little subtle stresses. And I can be entirely fine. And then all of a sudden, worry about, okay, well, I have to go do this. And, wow, what if I don't do it right? And all of a sudden, my mind's in this sort of turbulent, even sometimes very subtle way. It's not a big deal, but it's like, I hope I make a good impression, about to meet my stepmom, whatever that is. Or the things that we go in the day, if you really look at your life, you're going to notice that there's these little, very subtle stresses all the time that arise. Little aspirations, and I hope this happens, so I really hope that doesn't happen, and things that come in. And it's just not a really peaceful sense of well-being that is constant. And even when it's really good, as soon as it's really good, what happens? Well, I want this to last. I want to, make sure this, I can keep this. This is good. And then we lock things up, and then, we try to protect things, and we get insurance, and then, so all the things that we start enjoying, it's like, now we need to protect them, and now there's stress around that, or, I really always get fascinated about new cars, really nice new cars. I grew up in Southern California, and, people get a really nice new car. And then it's like, where do you park it, Because now you got to take up 2 spots. You don't want somebody ding in the car, And then how do I lock it? And then and then there's stress over where I'm going into a bad neighborhood, and can I leave my car in the street? How much joy is that car giving you? when I'm worried about where I can't even park it. And think about what we do in our lives like that, even where we set down a jacket, somewhere, that's my jacket, and I'm worried about that. Well, this is just something we don't even question, is it? It's just how life is. It's just how life is. It's filled with all these stresses, worries, thoughts. I need to keep this in my mind, blah, blah, blah. And it's the nature of kind of how we live. And so just being alive as a human, we're going to have these types of stress all the time. And we're really going to work really hard to have these really cool things happen so we can feel good for a little time. And then that time comes and goes, and then I'm going to put all my time and energy to make sure all this other stuff comes together, because, when this happens, I'm really going to have it made. If I just get that job, I'm going to have it made. Or if I just, if I get the degree, when I get the degree, I'm going to have it made. We get the degree, we get the job, and then we worry about keeping the job, or whether it's degree, or now I got the wrong degree, and now I want to do this. And then the agonizing over which degree to get. I don't really know what I want to do. It's tiring, isn't it? You start thinking about it. And all that is this outer experience. And so Buddhism, the Buddha looked at this and he looked at suffering and he said, well, there's these ways that we have dissatisfaction in our life. And some of them are pretty common. If I break my leg, it hurts, And all of us are subject to emotional pain, getting our heart broken, physical pain, getting sick. That's just natural. Suffering of change, a little more subtle. Suffering of change, when you really investigate it, and I really encourage you to do that, you'll start to recognize that everything that brings you joy in your life changes. And is actually the seeds of much of your dissatisfaction. It changes. Like I mentioned, I just get this really cool thing, like a new car. And I'm really happy until somebody dings it. Now I'm really unhappy. It just changed. It changed to be the thing I worry and stress over. The relationship I've always wanted now is why I'm in therapy, to try to maintain the relationship I've always wanted. And so the things that we really enjoy, it's called suffering. They transform into really a lot of suffering, stress, worry, and the common analogy I'll use there is food. Like that cheesecake I was just thinking about. Somehow I'm still thinking about it. First piece of cheesecake, good, right? Second piece, still pretty good. Third piece, it's not so good anymore, right? And if I keep eating, it's actually going to hurt. It's going to be very uncomfortable. So that cheesecake that was joyful now is no longer joyful. But if you look at anything in life, it's the same way. And the things that we get, so the suffering of change, it's a nice thing to investigate. I get really attached to something in a certain way because I expect it to give me a certain amount of pleasure. I attach to it, and then it becomes really a source of some stress and concern. Or it literally changes. That person I couldn't live without becomes the person I can't live with. And the things that we really, cherished, like that really cool flip phone that you got a long time ago, It lost its luster, man. It's lost its luster. Now I got the whatever this is. This is the Samsung 5. That's a whole different thing. And so what we start to see is there's just an unending dissatisfaction. Satisfying our desires doesn't work, does it? Because that desire gets satisfied, and then what's it do? There's more desire. And this same thing, I keep trying to get back. And then more on a deeper level, they call this sort of, the third type is a sort of pervasive suffering of existence, which I kind of brought up, is just being born, you're going to age, get sick, and die, and everyone you know will leave you. Yeah, very optimistic outlook. And but it's the way things are. It's just the way things are. Everything is like that. There's and that we're going to create a lot of stress and worry in our lives on these very subtle realms. So the Buddha looked at all this and he said, is it necessary? Is it really necessary to have a constant way of being in the world that isn't what we call just really peaceful at ease, well-being, resilient, without all that stress? Is this suffering or dissatisfaction, is it necessary? What's its real source? And so that's what brings us to where we're at today, which is in this next chapter is kind of what's the cause of all this messiness? What's the problem? And so the truth of the cause of suffering, and so here is where we enter into we have these what we call three root causes, three root delusions, and the way the Dalai Lama brought it up is he said, well, let's look at it from a big view and say, really what creates our unhappiness, our dissatisfaction in life, are an interaction between what we call mental afflictions and karma. So mental afflictions, we use the word kleshas. So these kleshas, mental afflictions, and karmas. And so mental afflictions, we can kind of pretty simple. Anger, resentment, jealousy, that's pretty much an afflicted mental state. I'm really upset, I'm resentful, I'm angry, I'm sad, whatever. But in this context, we're really talking about an afflicted state of mind is one that takes your mind away from a peaceful, clear state. So it's not limited to anger, resentment, jealousy. We can be really excited and really happy and be out of that as well. So an afflicted state of mind, these afflictions take us away from a really balanced, clear. They disturb the mind. That's a way of putting it. It disturbs the centered, balanced functioning of our mind and of our sense of well-being. So we have a lot of them, and it's not like what we often perceive of is that I'm not walking around with anger, right? Because I'm not sensing it right now. I'm not angry right now. But where is my anger? Is my anger just hanging out in the universe, waiting for someone to piss me off? Is that what it's doing? Like, I don't have any anger. I'm totally cool. You walk in, spit in my face. Now I'm angry. Okay. So where's the anger?
It's a seed in your mind.
It's in my mind, right? So the mental affliction of anger is in my mind, in the consciousness. When I'm angry, anger is in my mind. That's where it is. That's where it lives. It lives in my mind. It lives in my consciousness. And so our consciousness has these mental afflictions: anger, resentment, jealousy, frustration, sadness, whatever. We have all of these. We've experienced all of these. And they don't just go away. They're ready to rise to the challenge of you pissing me off. They're ready to rise to the dissatisfaction of not having cheesecake. They're waiting. They're waiting for the proper conditions. And they're there. And they don't just go away. And so if we start to understand, so he framed it in the sense that these, if we understand these mental afflictions, they create the karmas that limit our way of being in the world, that we're really limited in our interactions in the world because of karma. Karma kind of conditions us to how we experience our life. But what really contaminates that karma are the mental afflictions. And he talked about two types. Today, for those of you in the Mindful Life community, so some of you are in the Mindful Life community, I do an email every day, and there's a little lesson and an activity. And the lesson today was around expectations. Okay, the quote was, expectations are often blamed for causing most of our suffering. In fact, not all expectations are to blame, only the unrealistic ones, of which we seem to have an abundance. And so if we take a look at our expectations of realistic and unrealistic, this is kind of where we're going with this. Is it realistic to think that my mind will be free of anger, resentment, jealousy, frustration on its own? Is it realistic to think that if I'm angry and I talk about my my anger and I share my anger with you and I point to who's causing the anger, that that's going to make my anger go away or lessen the affliction? Is that realistic? And what we're saying is no, it's not realistic. What we water grows. And if I get resentful and upset, and I share it with you, and I tell you about it, and then I get very self-righteous about how somebody mistreated me and the poor treatment, what am I doing? I'm reinforcing my anger, I'm reinforcing my resentment, and I'm actually legitimizing my mental anguish. Because there's a cause, or that thing's the cause. And I have a right to be pissed off. And sure, yeah, you got a right. How's it feel? How's that feel? Is it serving you? Is being angry the way you want to be in the world? Is it beneficial in any way, shape, or form? You know, because when you're angry, you're certainly not happy. And what do you want to do? You know, what do you want to water? So when we look at realistic and unrealistic, we start to understand that it might be more realistic of an expectation to understand that the more I reinforce anger or mental afflictions in my life, the stronger they become. So he made a point to say that with mental afflictions, there's two types. One type is best expressed, and one type is best not expressed. Okay? And by expressed, he means really talking about, engaging, and reinforcing. So there are certain mental afflictions that we have in our life, old sufferings, wounds that we've carried for a bit, that create some problems in our lives. And then it's healthy to talk about those because they're preventing me from letting go and from moving on. So, abuse as a kid or some things that he actually gave an example from a time in his life as a childhood where he brought that back up to one of his mentors and they talked about it, and then it released the energy of that. So I call it an 80-20 breakdown, and this is not scientifically proven at all. It might even be 10-90, I don't know. I give it a 80-20. So it's not scientifically proven, it's just something I made up. Which means that the vast majority of our mental afflictions fall in this 80% category, which just means, you know what, if you don't water it, it doesn't grow. It's just not good to express. It's not healthy. It just feeds it. It doesn't make it go away. And there's a 20%, which is really helpful to talk about and deal with. And those are pretty common because they'll come up. They get triggered. They are something that reoccur and will get triggered. So sometimes you may notice when you're talking to someone, you get triggered and a really strong emotion comes up, and it might be a common theme. When I lost my daughter, I lost my daughter for a lot of years, and I got reunited with my daughter. So I was without her for 8 years, and then I got to be a dad. I found her, and I've raised her ever since. So I have a really strong sort of emotion around, people that lose their kids. I get really provoked by it, and so that's something that comes up. It doesn't prevent me from having a healthy relationship or doing, dad things. So it's not a harmful thing. But we have other things like that where maybe something from the childhood is strong and imprint, and it comes up. And so every time I see someone who reminds me of that person, I get angry, transference, and I don't like them. So that's a situation where it's kind of, there's something there to kind of talk about, to let go of a fear and insecurity, something that's arising. But these other mental afflictions, and he really highlighted two that get us into a lot of trouble. Lust and hatred is the ones he used. which you could also use as anger and attachment, right? Anger and attachment, lust and hatred. So lust, and not just sexual lust, but lust, a really attached view on things and people and stuff that we really like cheesecake. We could lust after cheesecake. See, I'm reinforcing that. Talking about it has not made the cheesecake desire go away. It hasn't. And maybe if I, 3 pieces. So I'm already thinking about cherries on top. So I'm actually reinforcing what I'm trying to talk about, which is that anger and attachment, or lust and hatred that he put, are primary factors that prevent us from being happy. And they are not best expressed. They're not something to water. They're not something to continue to express. When I get angry and or have hatred, and I tell you all about what I'm angry about and how I hate that person or hate what's going on, it feels kind of good temporarily, right? Like getting it out, we call venting. But if you look at a longer term, what's really happening? What's really happening long term is I've validated that I can get angry over that, and it's right, and you co-signed because you're my homie, and we're friends, and you got my back. Yeah, John, that's right. They shouldn't have treated you like that, and and now I'm not letting go of anger. I'm not lessening anger. I'm actually reinforcing a really good reason to get angry, and you validate it. It's all okay. And the thing about that is getting angry or having hatred, did that change my situation at all? Did it improve anything? No. Did it? All it did was take me away from being happy. And then it got me on, who knows, it could have been a 20-minute rant. I could be pissed off for a week. I could call everybody in my phone book. And so that whole time, it's a mental affliction. It's taken me away from my natural state of well-being. And I'm not addressing the actual issue. The actual issue of whatever it was, we can just solve that and move on, The real deal is this happened. Getting angry about it, isn't going to change. It happened. Dealing with it might. So accepting it happened allows me to actually do something about it. Ruminating on all the ways it shouldn't have happened, has no bearing in reality, because it did. I mean, I can talk all day long about philosophically how something shouldn't have happened, which, by the way, is insane, because if it happened, I'll guarantee you there's a cause for it. So it should have happened, right? If I think something shouldn't have happened, I'm negating the fact that there was a cause for it to happen. Yeah, it did happen. So there's a reason for it. It's just insane to think otherwise. And the only place that it shouldn't have happened is in my mind. Okay? That's the only place. And so now you can start to see how we get in a lot of trouble, right? And we're doing it to ourselves. And by expressing it and validating it and getting you worked up about it, guess what? I've actually got you angry now too. And we're still not dealing with the core issue, right? About learning how to live in a way that's clear and accurate and doesn't give rise to mental afflictions. So he said that, he pointed out that anger, hatred, that this is the most damaging quickly, okay? In the short term, a lot of damage, and we know that. When we get angry, we do stuff, cause a lot of damage. But he said lust and sort of the attachment piece is actually even more pernicious. It has a much longer term effect, and it is really the core affliction that that stains the karmas that keep us trapped in a limited way of being. It's that attachment and desires that we can't fulfill, and this type of attachment is always based on an exaggerated sense of what joy or happiness something or someone or some event will give me, and I get attached to it. And then I do a lot of things to make that happen, and I create a lot of tainted karma around that. And so if we start to understand that my emotional states, my mental afflictions, they can come and go, and I don't have to play. You just don't have to play. And that's an interesting thing to understand, because we don't understand that. To me, it's not, we're used to playing. I get angry, this is what I do. I get sad, this is what I do. And I am sad, I am angry. Well, what the Buddha started to notice was, you know what, you're not angry and you're not sad. Those are mental states. They come and go, you're still here. You don't have to engage them. You don't have to water them. You don't have to express them. They are temporary, and they don't exist anywhere but your mind. Oh, wow. That's different. You mean I don't have to react to them. They come and they'll go on their own. And when we practice mindfulness, we learn to really observe the mind. What you'll actually start to be able to do is you'll see some thoughts come. By the way, you've always got stuff's popping up all the time. You may have noticed when you're meditating. Right? You may have noticed. The mind's busy. And a lot of the times we're not even paying attention to all the stuff the mind's doing, because we're doing other things. We're focused on something else. And then the mind comes back and we jump in. Well, when we're developed of a really clear, observant mind, we can notice really insane thoughts happening. Angry thoughts, or just crazy thoughts, or whatever's happening. And it's interesting because we can observe it, and in observing it by not engaging in it, what we call cognitive fusion with it, instead of just experiencing anger, saying I am angry, it's different than I'm experiencing anger. It's a different thing. It's a very different thing. You can see already a little different. I'm experiencing anger. It's a mental state. It'll come and go. I'm really angry. It's a very different experience. Well, there's a relationship around karma, because when I get really angry and I identify with that, I am just watering the seeds of karma, and it's not going to be a pleasant outcome. But you can observe anger and not engage, and the analogy is it's like witnessing a crime. If you're a witness to a crime, you're not guilty, right? No, you saw a crime, it went on. If you're observing anger, you're just witnessing it. You're not fused with it, and so the karma is not going to be weighted to how angry I am or what I'm doing with that. You just observe it. It comes and goes. Really sick, crazy thoughts, because I'll have those arise. Have you ever had those? Just crazy stuff, just angry, weird. You just, whoa, really? That was pretty selfish, self-centered. Oh, that's just insane. And then they just come. I mean, if you ever do a meditation where you just observe thoughts, it'll blow your mind. It just like, and the thing is, we're not doing it. That's the thing. It's our consciousness is just this stuff's coming up. But we're not consciously. I didn't choose to think about that. It just happened. And so the beauty is that the Buddha started to notice that, well, we can choose to engage in a thought or not. We are not our thoughts, that they come and they go. Our emotions come and we don't have to play. And what happens if we don't play? Because if there's no cause, there's no result. And so understanding this then, the real cause of suffering and mental afflictions in life, at the very root, so he talked about the afflictions, and he really was focusing on two really heavy ones, attachment and anger, or lust and hatred is the words he used, is misperception, misunderstanding. that's what gives rise. I have a strong misperception about the world, myself, my feelings, and you. And based on that misperception, I get really attached to things I like, and I think they're going to make me really happy. And there's some things I really don't like, and I try to avoid those at all costs. And so it's misperception, attachment, and aversion. It's the triad that creates all the suffering. And so there's three ways that we really misperceive the world. That's real clear. And if we perceive the world accurately, our experience of it accurately, we experience ourselves, phenomenon accurately, Buddhism says you won't have the mental afflictions arise. That they can only arise based on misperception. So the real root is wisdom, to actually see how you are and the world is and phenomena is. Get to know yourself, the world as it is. And so all of Dharma is asking you to see clearly. And he's not saying this is how you should see the world. He says, no, you start investigating and start seeing what's true, what holds up. Is that car going to give you lasting happiness? Is that relationship going to give you lasting happiness? Are you never going to get sick if you exercise and eat right? All these unrealistic expectations that we carry into our life, take a look at them. How insane are they? And then, when they don't work out, I get angry, frustrated, resentful, jealous. So I keep having an unrealistic expectation that if things just go my way, I'm going to be happy. And, when you start to think about that, in just the light of any just basic observation, you can see how insane that is. That one being amongst 7 billion other humans, not even counting animals, insects, how everything goes together in air and weather, that I think that, Glenwood Canyon should be open so I could get to Denver. Really? It's just an unrealistic expectation that I'm the center of the universe. And it should just line up, man. So we started to investigate and look at what are our assumptions and what's actually the way things are. And if we can start bringing our attention into how things function, then we can have our expectations be more realistic. So going back to where we were at with mental afflictions, we really, the more we water anger and lust and attachment and just pursue desire, we reinforce desire and anger and hatred. That's what we do. And for some reason, we actually think that somehow that's going to be okay. Good luck. May the force be with you. We also somehow have an unrealistic expectation that my mind, which is distracted, busy, constantly grasping onto things and going through stress, worry, fear, anxiety, somehow will just be okay on its own. Like I don't have to do anything to cultivate inner peace or train my mind or to see clearly. That it just be, right? And so what the book's saying here at this point is really saying, well, here's just kind of how things work. Check it out. Notice when you engage in things, do you have an unrealistic expectation around them? Do you think that your partner should blow your mind all the time and produce exceptional happiness? And if they don't, they're just not doing their job because you're supposed to make me happy. Would you get with it? I am not feeling fulfilled in this relationship. You should change. Huh? Come on, we think it sometimes, don't we? If they were just like this, I'd be happy. If my job was just like this, I'd be happy. If, just on and on. It's just phenomenal, and we'll cling to it. We will have learned, when we know better, we'll talk about, happiness inside job. And, where's the damn cheesecake? We just boom, like, yeah, I can talk to you all about this, and then I go outside, and, yeah. And so it's pervasive, and it's conditioned, and it doesn't change on its own. It actually takes some effort on our part to start bringing our mind back to reality. Start noticing that things are impermanent and they change. Start noticing that the people and events and circumstances in your life have ups and downs. And that there's nothing outside of you, period, that will ever give you that lasting inner peace and well-being. It just doesn't exist out there. If you find it, let me know. Our real work is in our mind. Our real work is in our mind and how we engage in the world. If we want inner peace, well-being, and happiness, right, we need to plant the seeds for that. It's an unrealistic expectation to think that that will grow if I don't water it. If I'm watering anger all the time, how am I going to grow happiness? Right? How's that going to work? If I'm getting you to justify my resentments and constantly this is right and that's wrong and if I'm constantly doing that, how am I going to find and water the seeds, that have connection and tranquility and well-being and resiliency? How can I water the seeds of acceptance when I'm spending all my time saying how it should be different? What am I watering? And so the invitation is, well, let's start understanding the rules of the game and get some expectations that are realistic, that actually apply and will probably work out, and try it, and you try it. It's not saying this is the way it is. It's saying, well, here's the basic kinds of things that we've noticed. If you water anger, it gets stronger. It doesn't go away. If you water resentment, it gets stronger. If you water desires and attachment, what happens? They get stronger. If I start watering wisdom, love, compassion, kindness, acceptance, well, that grows. And by wisdom, we're really looking at seeing things just accurately. Just knowing that let's just not exaggerate. Let's just not exaggerate. Let's not expect something to give us more happiness than it can. And let's not expect that something will be more terrible than it is. And let's not expect that somehow the rules of life should not apply to me. Okay? Because, I shouldn't get cancer. I shouldn't get leukemia. I shouldn't have a broken leg. I shouldn't have. Why not? Right? Other people do all the time. I mean, that's part of life. But somewhere in my mind, I really think it shouldn't happen to me. Which is, get rid of a lot of suffering. It can happen to you. I get that. But, I get that. I understand. I feel bad for you. I'm really sorry. I'll say some prayers. But when it happens to me, all of a sudden it's not fair. It's not right. It's for me. Yeah, and we really have it bad, right? Here in Carbondale and this beautiful mountain community. Yeah. It's terrible. It's just, my day, it was so long and hard. Let me tell you about it. As people are washing up in Syria and stuff, We just, our mind is not often in a very clear perspective way of being in the world. And if you start to notice that, let's get just on a real practical level of investigating when I'm angry, frustrated, resentful, jealous, sad, blah, blah, blah. Trace back and go, is this realistic? How big is my problem? And what is its foundational cause? And I'll guarantee you that you will not find a mental affliction that does not arise other than you want things to be different than they are. Right? Or it could be you worry about how things might be that haven't happened yet. Which is really fascinating, right? Because it hasn't even happened yet, and I'm pretty stressed about it. And that's nowhere but my mind. And I think things should be different than they are, or I want them to be different than they are. And there's a subtle difference here, and I think we need to start with it. Wanting things to be different than they are is not nearly a big a problem as thinking things should be different than they are. See, there's a difference there. Things suck. I want to change them. Well, I accept them and I change them. That's wanting things to be different and doing something about it. That's fine. Nothing wrong with that. That's actually a realistic way of doing it. But the time wasted of having something happen and just thinking how it shouldn't be like this and ruminating and going through the whole list of who did what and who screwed what up and pointing the finger and constantly looking out there about how things shouldn't be the way they are is A, insane. B, doesn't solve a problem. And C, doesn't allow us to even accept what's happening so I can improve it. And all the time, I am watering the seeds of mental affliction. And in the process, creating a lot of karma. I haven't even got to that part yet. That really limits us. So what he's pointing out as he's entering here is that most of our mental afflictions, the vast majority of them, we just need to not water. We need to not give them strength and energy. And they fade. Just like if you don't water a plant, it dies. Now there's this other percent that we talk about, right? Like I said, really old wounds that need to heal. That's a different thing. That's not what we're talking about. Anger, lust, attachment. And it's funny because, we really, we thrive on attachment, don't we? And that's the most pernicious of our mental afflictions. We write love songs and poetry. Try to find a love song that has any healthy connotation to a meaningful relationship. Good luck, right? I just can't live without you. It's hard, right? They're probably out there, I'm sure, somewhere. And so we actually elaborate qualities on people, places, and things and romanticize them and attach to them and really, and it creates stress and attachment. And so I want to make a distinction here. This doesn't mean you don't love things or appreciate them. You love the heck out of them. And there's a very different thing between love and attachment, right? Attachment, I love you, I want you to make me happy. Love, I love you and I want you to be happy.
Also attachment, I love you and I want you to stay forever.
Yeah, which will make me happy, right? It's all about me though. Right? I really love you. Hang out, take care of me, and be in my life, And right? Whereas if I really love you, I want you to be happy whether you want to be with me or not, right? That's probably a more extending love. So Dalai Lama would say the best kind of love is where your love for each other exceeds your need for each other, right? So we confuse attachment with love. We confuse, desires with what we really want too. And that's another distinction, right? Desires, a lot of times say, I really want to just go do this, and it's unhealthy or whatever, right? I really want to go act out in some way. Well, is that what you really want? Or is that a desire and an impulse? Because what I really want is to be a healthy, whole human being who doesn't act out. So I may say, I really want to go do this, but that's a desire. That's not what I really want. What I really want is to not have to go do that. So we often get confused around attachment and love and desire. So this is when you can get rid of attachment, you can actually love better. It's not a detached state. It's a non-attached state, right? It's not disinterested. It's very interested. It is really engaged. And it's not wounded when you do things that are different than I want you to, because that's about me. So as we enter in this, we start to see the liberation around letting go of attachment. So I can actually be engaged in my interactions with you and what I'm doing. And really appreciating a good meal, right? I can appreciate a good meal. People have been bringing over these great meals for Laura. I'm glad I married her. If it was me sitting there with a fusion, I'd be getting cold mutton probably. But since she's sick, I'm sitting there going, yeah, man, they like you. What's getting dropped off today? You know? And so yeah, I'm living large for the next couple of weeks. So so we have these nice meals, and it's like, yeah, you can really enjoy the meal. You can appreciate the kindness and love and concern of people bringing it. But what it doesn't get to is start thinking, well, I should have people bringing me meals all the time. Yeah, Laura, you know what? Don't get well too quick. I'm really digging the meals here. Can you, drag this out a bit? Because that's where the mind starts to go, right? Well, this is good. Could you guys keep doing it? Or that this is the best meal ever. That's my favorite stuff. How we exaggerate. Oh, this is the best meal ever. Until somebody else brings another one tomorrow. And then the expectations and all that we build around that. And so being realistic, having realistic expectations in and of itself are actually healthy. Expectations are not the problem. Unrealistic expectations are the problem, right? If I didn't have realistic expectations, why would I go to school to get a degree? I would expect that if I go to school, do my work, I'll get a degree, right? If I go to work, do my hours, I'll expect a paycheck. That's a realistic expectation. If I expect that job to give me the inner peace and fulfillment of my life, that's probably unrealistic. But it will give me a paycheck. If I show up for work in a way that's meaningful and healthy, well, that might lead me to some inner peace and well-being. But that's coming from me. It's not the job. It's not the circumstance. It's how I'm engaging in the job. So what we water grows. And if I water meaning and intention and clarity in my life, well, that grows. So if I take, for example, here, we're spending a little time talking about reality. And we're kind of getting it a little bit, right? We're kind of getting it a little bit. So we'll water the seed of clarity and some wisdom, a little virtue. And then we'll walk out the door. And an hour from now, what will you be watering? Will we be reinforcing unrealistic expectations? Man, if only this were happened, I'd be happy it hadn't made. What happens? You can see that the cards are kind of stacked because we have habituated patterns. So karma, we're getting to the karma. Because of these mental afflictions, we do things, we create karmas. Karmas are these, there's, in 5 minutes, I'm not going to do all of karma. So, but I'm going to say that karma, if you think of it in a particular way, gives us habits, tendencies, and predispositions, right? We get habits. We get habituated. What we do creates patterns and habits. You learn how to drive a stick shift. You don't even have to think about a stick shift when you drive. First time, it's pretty hard. When I start in relationships, I'll develop certain patterns. Around certain foods, I have patterns and habits. People they'll smoke a cigarette after a meal, or we just start doing that. We start getting habits and patterns and ways of seeing people and ways of judging people and tendencies, and we just reinforce it all day long. And so we have these habits and tendencies and ways of seeing the world and how we label things, what I like and what I don't like, and then I start realizing, these aren't always very healthy for me. And I want to develop some new patterns. I want to start seeing the world more clearly. I want to start having less mental afflictions. I'd like to have much more joy and peace and resiliency in my mind and well-being. I like that. I want to water that. And so, we come to something like this. We spend an hour on that, and we water it a little bit. A whole week may go by, and then maybe it'll come next week. Maybe it'll be a couple weeks. Who knows? But when did I water these seeds again? Or did I continue to walk out this door and start watering all the seeds of mental afflictions and unrealistic expectations, habits, and tendencies? And is it realistic to think if I spend the majority of my time here that these seeds will grow? What do you think? I don't know.
Wait, what's the question?
If I spend the majority of my time watering these seeds of unrealistic expectations and labeling projections, do you think these seeds of clarity and kindness will grow? What do you think is going to grow? Just saying. Just saying. So, what we water grows, what we pay attention to grows. And that's where he was going here, is we start paying attention. One of the starting points is to just stop watering these seeds. Stop expressing all of the anger, resentments, and jealousies. How about not complain today? Try that. Take a day, don't complain. What an interesting way of being. Just what's there to complain about? Which is different from addressing a real problem. You know, addressing problems, but complaining. That's a good practice for a week. Let's try not to complain for a week and just see what happens. We're really addicted to complaining. You know, there's somebody has this quote that said, "Why don't we talk about our joys? You know, let's talk about what we have to be grateful for. You know, instead of complaining." Just watering that. So I think that's a good exercise this week. Is let's just try to spend some time this week and try not to complain much. How's that? That's a really good intention for the week. And see if by not watering it, what happens. And maybe share some things about gratitude or share your appreciation to someone you're talking to, right? Instead of complaining about it. And so instead of thinking about what I don't have, what's not right, how I'd like something to be, all of which is in my mind, versus cultivating gratitude and an appreciation, some loving kindness for others for what I have. Which, by the way, is more realistic, because I'll guarantee you any one problem you have in your life, to whatever degree it is, whether it's traffic or whether it's a broken leg or whether you need a cervical fusion of your neck, for that one thing going wrong, there is 1,000 things going right. You know, Laura was there getting her surgery done, and she was just eternally grateful that, wow, they have techniques where they can actually take a piece of your hip, put it together, screw this stuff together, and fix this stuff in a hospital with a qualified surgeon and change your life. Wow. You know, imagine if they didn't. So it wasn't, I have to have surgery. It was, I have an opportunity to go through a procedure that will give me my life back. What a cool thing. So if we really bring perspective, we're bringing clarity to a situation. When you bring clarity, we go back to, if I see the world accurately, it's very difficult for mental afflictions to arise. Because they're always tied to a totally unrealistic expectation of how the world actually is and what will make me happy, and a grasping and a misperception of self and how the world works. So we're not saying stuff anything. That's not healthy. It's not healthy to stuff anger. That's not what we're saying. Notice anger, but I don't need to feed it. I don't need to tell you all about it. I can just notice I'm pretty pissed off now. Maybe I shouldn't say something. And I better not hit enter on that keyboard right now. You know, maybe I'll come back and write that email tomorrow. Okay? And what you may notice tomorrow is that anger's not there anymore. You may notice that. So what we water grows. So in this sense, we're bringing in the idea that these mental afflictions are in our consciousness, they're in our mind. They're like little seeds, and they're there. Anger's waiting. It's waiting for us to give it some nourishment. And you'll notice that not only is it that person that I get angry at, well, how tired was I today? What else was going on in my life today? You know, did I have some bad news before that? If I was feeling really good, would that same person doing the same thing even bug me? I may not even notice, right? There's a relationship, an interdependent relationship happening. Life's relational. So So as we enter in, let's start seeing that the root cause of our suffering is misperception, misunderstanding. We want to bring more clarity. But in order to get there, we need to work with the mental afflictions first to start to get to having a more natural way of seeing the world. And the only way to start seeing that is starting to reduce our afflictions and do a few practices that are antidotes to our problems. So I think a good one to start with is just start noticing this week to see if you each day wake up and go, you know what, I'm going to try not to complain today. And instead, I'm actually going to try to appreciate things today. It's an opposite antidote, okay? Because I cannot have appreciation in my mind at the same time as dissatisfaction. It's just not going to work. I can have it pretty quick. I can go from appreciating real quick in a nanosecond, but it can't be in the same instance for the same thing. It's one or the other, right? So this week, let's look at the mental afflictions and just start noticing. I mean, you can expand it to other feelings that will come and go. But again, I want to emphasize it's not a matter of stuffing or ignoring anger. It's just not feeding it. Okay? If there's a real problem, we'll deal with the problem, but you don't need to complain to everybody about it. But you might need to tell someone about a problem. And that's different, right? It's problem solving. There's problem solving and there's complaining. Okay? So sometimes people take these things to extremes, you know. And if, you know, somebody's sticking a knife in your foot, you know, it's not complaining to tell them to stop. But now it's funny because I have a talk like loving kindness. So we think we should be doormats. That's not at all what we're saying. Because loving kindness, you have boundaries. But here's the analogy to just make it all sort of, hopefully, really give it context. When you have an itch and you scratch it, what happens? Generally, it feels pretty good because you're scratching it, and then you stop scratching it, and then what happens? It gets worse, right? And that's kind of what happens here. My anger, if I talk about it and get you a cosign, it feels pretty good. But I've actually made it worse in the long run. It's like the itch. So we keep giving attention to the itch, it grows. But we'll notice that if we just let the itch come and go on its own, it'll be, you know, quicker. What we give attention to grows. So in this sense, do you want to give a lot of attention to anger, resentment, jealousy, you know, etc.? Or so it's not that I'm stuffing it. Yeah, I'm pissed off right now. But I know it's temporary. I'm going to let it come and go. And I'm just going to problem solve. So it's not denying. It's not stuffing. That's not healthy. And it's not saying, I'm not angry. Have you ever done that when you talk to someone and you tell them, you look pretty angry? I'm not angry. Okay. I was confused. Just saying. So it's not that. It's just that we don't need to exacerbate what's already there. Okay. All right. So let's do a little dedication, and we've got homework this week, haven't we? I'm trying to think if there's other announcements. Yeah, I told you about the mindfulness and all that. Leadership meeting. Yeah, we'll have that on Sunday. Okay, and Shannon will be there. Okay, so all of you online, thank you as well, and all of you. We'll do a dedication and dedicate the merit and the virtue that we've and wisdom that we've accumulated for the benefit of all beings. Let us dedicate the virtue and wisdom that we've accumulated here today and throughout our lives, both individually and collectively. We dedicate this for the benefit of all beings. May all beings be free of suffering and find lasting happiness. And may we be able to use the virtue and wisdom accumulated here today and throughout our lives to purify our own minds, to gain clear wisdom and insight into how we engage in the world so that we can truly become enlightened for the benefit of all beings. All right. Thank you all so much. Be well. Try to stay out of trouble. Bring some cheesecake over.
He's like, no, but for real.
Yeah, no, really.